Welcome back to Stoneheart Sports, and man, did we have some crazy NFL playoff games that just happened in this divisional round. Very intriguing and interesting round. So many good games. Maybe not great for my pockets necessarily, but still just some really good content and stuff to watch. This is not going to be a normal podcast episode. I know I normally do those on my actual podcast, Stoneheart Sports, but this is just going to be kind of an off-the-cuff YouTube video I wanted to make because I had a lot of takeaways, and I'm going to give my reactions to all these games and then kind of preview what they mean for the NFC and AFC title game. So if you want to actually maybe get educated and know, hey, this is what I should be taking away from these games, and this is what really is why we got to the result that we got to, go ahead and make sure you listen up and watch the video. But let's not waste some more time. Let's just go ahead and get started. Kansas City versus Houston was the first game on the slate. Obviously, Kansas City at home in the playoffs, they normally win these games, so they did end up coming away with the W. But the biggest takeaway was Houston feeling as if they were shafted by the refs, and a coach kind of insinuating that, a player straight up saying it. So I think what we can look at is, which, by the way, my take with this, just the Chiefs in general, is I think that while you can't necessarily deny that some of the calls aren't great, particularly with Patrick Mahomes, I think what we've done is with the Chiefs, we've zeroed in a ton and put like them under a microscope and are keening in on certain plays and calls that aren't here or there, when in reality these same things happen like all around the NFL, like on a game-to-game basis, and it might just be spread around. Like one thing might happen in one game, another thing might happen in another game, and the same thing happened on like 2 different weeks, and I think, again, it's a human element. The refs are supposed to, they are humans, stuff happens. I understand people's distaste for the refs because I feel like I'm on the slight. The majority is over here of where they feel. I feel like I'm slightly, if the middle is here and then Chiefs fans are over here, I feel like I'm slightly on the side of the people. But I do think objectively, like, some of the stuff that they do with the NFL being rigged and everything is absurd. It's so stupid. They're complete anyone who says the NFL is rigged is a moron. Like with the refs and everything like that, it's just not true. It's just not. And I think it's pretty much just down to, hey, the NFL is pushing quarterback safety, and if Mahomes is going to do all this different stuff and defenders are going to try and stop him, he tries to bait it sometimes. He does. But guess what? More power to him. That's kind of just how it goes. And he's going to try and do that, and if the NFL is playing that way, then he's going to take advantage of it. So that's kind of how it goes. But I do think there are times where it's like, really? Come on. And I think in this game there was one play I agree with. Again, with the calls before that, Houston had outgained, just for the game itself, Houston outgained Kansas City by over 100 yards, had 0 turnovers, and lost, which almost never happens in the playoffs. So it is very much a, hey, where did this game go wrong? And I think the first thing people look at is calls. That's not the first thing I look at, though. We can still dive into them because there is one I think that could have had an effect. The first one was the roughing the passer on Mahomes. In real time, you just look at it, it's 50-50. In real time, it kind of looks like a penalty. They put it in playback. It technically wasn't, but you can't call that rigged because you can't review it. You're not allowed to go back and play back and then review the play for roughing the passer or whatever and then turn it over. You can't do that. So it was on 3rd and 8. Kansas City, it leads to them getting a field goal. So, yeah, that play led to points. But in real, it's not objectively like, oh yeah, this is a terrible call, blah blah blah. It was kind of a human, hey, in the real time it looked like it. And then the other one was when 2 Texans players came together and hit each other when they were trying to get Mahomes down, when he was not in the pocket, by the way. And it they call the unnecessary roughness. And I think this one was really just an instinct by the refs because they are told to protect the quarterback. That's what they're preached, protect the quarterback. So if they see anything close to that, they're going to throw it. I think I think what we should be doing is not complaining that a human did what they were told and made a slight error in real time. I think it needs to be, hey, anything involving the quarterback needs to be reviewable. Anything. Like, because the quarterback, the issues people have is with these calls that are out the quarterback. Hey, if they see, look, these two Texans players didn't even really hit him, they slid here, it shouldn't be a penalty, and you should be able to review it and turn it over. That's the thing I think that needs to be done. And then it'll fix everything, because they're not going to see it and then review it and then, oh, they love Mahomes, so they're going to do this. No, if that happens, then yeah, maybe we can get into that. But you can't review it at all. And they're going to protect guys like that. Anyone like that. That's just how it goes. Especially ones that are more well-known. So if it was Burrow or someone else like that, it'd be the same thing. Because these are the star guys that need to keep in the NFL. So that apart, you could say yeah. But that's just objectively smart. You know, that's kind of what they need to do. And it would be a penalty for a lot of other people as well. So that's kind of that thing. But when you look into that, the repercussions of it, on that play, it was 1st and 10 on their own side of the field. So they weren't in the red zone. It wasn't a free 3rd down conversion. It was 1st and 10. They had a 4th down conversion on that drive where they could have got stopped. And they had a 3rd and goal that led to a touchdown on that same drive where they could have got stopped. So, of course, it did turn into a 9-point game because Houston missed the extra point, which we'll get into next. But they had chances to stop them on that drive too. It didn't just give them the win. And Houston going into this game was 5th in the NFL in offensive penalties. So this is not a very offensive, safe or disciplined team. That's not really what they've been all year. But going back to my other point, this is the biggest thing. This is the reason they lost: the penalty or the field goals. They missed a 55-yarder, which I think objectively, hey, it happens. It's the NFL. The biggest thing though was they missed an extra point to tie the game, because with field goals and everything here and there, they ended up being down by 9, so 2 possessions instead of 1, and that really put them behind the 8 ball. To, hey, time was against them. They had to get 2 possessions, to be in the lead, so they had to throw a ton. They had to make sure they're going down the field. So stuff like that matters so much because it changes the way you play. You can't just look at a score and say, oh, take this out and then this would have happened. Like, there's a butterfly effect, something like that. It ends up having other repercussions. So them missing the extra point made it towards 2 possessions. Now they changed their game plan because they need to get down and score fast. And then they had another blocked field goal where they tried to make it 1 possession game, but it was at the end, so it didn't really matter. But the other big thing was sacks. Kansas City had 8 sacks in this game, and they had, it was mainly in the second half, and it was because they mainly had to obviously throw to get back in the game. But again, if they make the extra point, they're not playing desperately from behind as if they were where they were in this game. And Kansas City in the 4th quarter had 2 drives at the end where they could have put it away, and they just didn't. They didn't get any points, and Houston had 2 drives before the final drive, so they had 3 drives in total to try and get it within 1 possession, and they couldn't do it. So while yes, I think the calls could have gone either way, one of them I think should have, it didn't give them the win in the slightest. It just didn't. But did Kansas City look like a Super Bowl team in that game? No, they didn't. They did not look like a Super Bowl team in that game, which makes it really hard to pick the next game for who they play in the AFC title game. It's going to be very interesting. But the next game was Detroit at Washington. And man, this one hurt. As a Detroit Lions enjoyer, this one was very shocking. But at the same time, it wasn't. It was weird. Jaden Daniels is undoubtedly the best rookie quarterback of all time. No question. And Washington is a model that clearly shows, hey, you can turn it around in the NFL pretty quick. It sure takes a lot of change from the top down in this case, but you can change it around pretty quickly. I think, unfortunately for Detroit, this really just comes down to the biggest thing being the injuries. It just completely collapsed the team, specifically defensively, and it just became way too much. And then number 2 is technically number 1 for in-game stuff. Pretty simple. Quarterback. I mean, Losing Amik Robertson at the start of the game, their best corner, definitely hurt, but it ultimately was the -5 turnover differential that absolutely killed it for them. There were some drops. There were 3 drops in this game. It's the most for Detroit in a game all year. But the run game was really going. They were killing the run game. The O-line was good. It was objectively good. And Goff had 3 picks and a fumble. And it really started when it was 3rd and 1. They started fine. They're up 7-3 in the red zone. Washington sends a blitz. Amon-Ra falls down on his route. No one else was open, and Washington gets a strip sack. Hey, unfortunate stuff like that happens. It's okay. It didn't kill the game. They had another touchdown, and it was 14-10 because Washington ended up scoring on that drive. Detroit responded. But it really put them behind the 8 ball, which was also because Detroit got the ball first. And Detroit just could not stop Washington. Their defense was too injured, which is why I say it's number 1. But it led to more of a Jared Goff show when they were down, which is just not the recipe for success to what some people thought. I had him maybe a little bit lower in my quarterback rankings last year than some people expected. I'm sure if he didn't have this performance, he obviously would climb my ranks a bit, but he would be at top 5 for so many other people. And I think a lot of, just deep down, I didn't voice it as much as Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold was pretty easy. But Jared Goff, I wasn't thinking it'd be immediate, but I thought, hey, maybe Super Bowl, something like that, it might come out. But it just, I don't think he's that guy to be able to win you the game throwing from behind. It just doesn't seem like he's not Stafford. I'm sorry. And I know that that's hard to hear for some fans, but they still would make the trade because it made their team, basically. But what we'll talk about with Stafford in his game, that's just not Jared Goff. He can be so successful if a majority of stuff's going right, not everything, not a Brock Purdy where everything needs to be right, a majority, a slight good majority. But if you got to get dug out of the hole, it can't be Jared Goff. It just can't. And I think the thing that baffles me is, it really fell apart when they were only down by 3. And the first big indicator of that, not the strip sack, because that happens. It was only their, first sack of the game. They only had one other after that. It was the first interception. Washington only set 3 rushers. He stepped up in the pocket, wasn't getting hit, wasn't really pressured, maybe a little bit, but not much compared to other throws. And it was totally wobbled and overthrown over the middle, and it was literally a bad QB play 101. Don't overthrow over the middle, and it's a pick 6. So now they're down by 2 possessions. Right before the half, they try and make it a 1-score game. Could have really set them up. He just line drives a deep ball, doesn't give it much arc to Jameson Williams, and it's intercepted. And it was 1st and 10, by the way. 1st and 10. So now they're at the point where they could have kept it a 1-score game, and they still were scoring, but Washington, it's 4th and 2 for Washington. Detroit is down by only 3 points, and Washington's going for it on 4th down in the red zone. If they get a stop here, it could be huge because they could tie the game if they go and get a field goal, start the lead. And Detroit has 12 men on the field, and then Washington punches it in. So it really just showed that if it wasn't going to be one thing for Detroit that was going to ruin him, it was going to be something else. And then obviously at the end, Jameson Williams interception, tried to do a trick play, just terrible decision. And then Jared Goff had his 3rd pick on like a nothing interception to end the game when they weren't going to win anyways. So mainly it was 2 picks that actually mattered, and then the Jameson Williams pick kind of just ended it. I think it kind of just sealed the deal for 100% there. But for Washington, while I think it was more Detroit imploding and injuries, this offense is obviously legit, and it's so special in the fact that if it's 3rd and short, you're not stopping them. But it's not because it's hard to stop them on 3rd down. It's because they're just not going to be stopped on 3 yards or less for 2 plays in a row. It just doesn't. It just doesn't happen because their third down conversion rate was not very good, but they get so many fourth downs. Because if it's fourth and short and they're relatively in range, they're going for it. Because if they didn't get it on third and short, because it's so hard to stop them 2 plays in a row. And it's just with Jaden Daniels' versatility and Cliff Kingsbury calling plays, it's just a great match for them. The only time it actually did happen where they got stopped was that weird Marcus Mariota failed QB sneak pitch back or whatever they were supposed to do. That was the only time they didn't get a main fourth and short or third and short. That was it. Was that. So it just very hard to stop there. But this was really a winnable game for Detroit. It really was. Even with their defensive issues and Washington being so hard to stop, there were points in the game where they just shot themselves in the leg and they totally had a chance. And the interceptions, obviously, you can say it was the defense, doing good there, but the offensive line played good. The running game was there. There weren't many pressures or sacks to force these interceptions. I think that's when you say, hey, he threw a lot of picks because there's so much pressure. There really wasn't. Aside from the one that turned into a forced fumble, but that wasn't losing you the game. That didn't lose you the game. What lost you the game was the interceptions. One that directly led to a touchdown, and then the other one that could have been a touchdown. That's a 14-point swing. And that could have got you the game. Combined with, obviously, hey, again, like we mentioned with the butterfly effect, if you are in that position, you're not doing a Jameson Williams trick play, get us down the field, please. We need you to throw a touchdown. They're going to run their good, normal offense, and they're not going to have safeties back all the time because they know they're going to throw. That wouldn't be the case. They'd be able to run the ball with Jahmyr Gibbs, who was doing an amazing job. So if those 2 plays don't happen, I think they win this game because they are going to be running the ball down the field because they're within 1 possession or tied or winning because it's a 14-point swing with Jared Goff. So while I do really dive in and see, okay, why was the reason this happened and everything, this one was just Jared Goff. It really was. Terrible. Horrendous. And now you got Ben Johnson gone to Chicago. Aaron Glenn probably gone to the Jets. We'll see if they can fill the void that they leave because it's going to be a void. I think for Lions fans to be, optimistic, this happened with the Eagles, and the Eagles are now back in this situation. So I think you still have the talent there. You do, and I think as a thrower, Goff is better than Hurts, although they are both limited in their own ways. You still have a great O-line, great weapons, defense needs to be healthy. It's not like they have bad players, they just need to get healthy. You could still be there. You still can. It's just you really got to nail these coordinators, and I think whether it's going from within and maybe you get an OC that had already learned under Ben Johnson, that might be good, and then maybe go out of house to get a DC or something. Maybe Dan Campbell does DC stuff himself. I don't know. But I think if you can get the coordinators solid, they don't have to be insane, but good, you can be right back here. Because the odds of this performance happening again with the amount of injuries you had, the most players on IR at a certain point, and high majority of them were defense, just really unfortunate. I think you can be back in the spot. And maybe even more. But Washington, obviously we mentioned, very dangerous team, especially offensively on third and short. And then the next one was Philly versus the Rams. This one was very chaotic and really up and down, basically with the weather. And I'm going to go on a limb and say if it was relatively normal weather for this time of the year, like Kansas City, Buffalo, the Rams win this game. I think so. I don't even know how they had a chance to win it at the end of the game. I really don't. That was insane. And I think similarly with Detroit, but on a different scale, it was the turnovers that lost them the game. And the turnovers, you can say, was kind of mainly in part because of the weather. They had 2 fumbles lost that were kind of basically weather fumbles, snow fumbles. That was kind of what happened. They had the same amount of yards per play, the Eagles and the Rams. They were within 2% of each other on third down percentage. They had the same amount of penalties, but the turnovers just made it hard for them to come back. Yet they still almost did, literally. The weather obviously really favored the Eagles, but the Rams didn't they didn't come back because Kyron Williams ran the ball all the way down the field. It was Stafford actually throwing the ball down the field in that weather, of which I would say if it was Hurts and this offense, if they're actually confident to throw and win these games, they almost lost because they didn't throw. They literally almost lost because of that. They had very quick drives at the end of the game when the weather got a little bit better. That gave LA the chance to get the ball back and come back. And Saquon Barkley basically saved them because on the final 3 drives, they didn't do anything except one of them, which was one play by Saquon Barkley breaking off another 70-plus yard touchdown run that basically saved them the game. Because if that didn't happen, it didn't look like they were doing much with LA coming back. And then Stafford and LA, they were down 6, having just had they literally just scored like very quickly, got a really quick stop. They go down the field with just another amazing Stafford drive, an insane Puka Nacua catch, and they were right there in the red zone. It was like 3rd and short, I think, and the best player on defense, and the real reason why this team is where it is, defensively I mean, Jalen Carter gets a sack on 3rd down inside the red zone, which leads to a long 4th down that they had to go for, and they just couldn't get it. So if that sack doesn't happen by Jalen Carter, LA had 4 downs. If they got that first down, they had 4 chances inside the 10 to score and kick a PAT to win the game because Philly missed 2 PATs. They would have won the game. I mean, that's just crazy. So, I think we really need to look, hey, Eagles, if you're saying you don't care, you're fine to throw the ball, whatever, if the Eagles get in a position where they have to, I don't trust that at all. I really don't. And I think if the weather helped them a ton in this game, it really did. And that's not going to happen in the Super Bowl, Maybe it'll happen in the NFC title game again, but you're playing a different team in the NFC title game. You are. And I think I'm going to go on a limb and say if the Rams won that game against the Eagles, I think they beat the Commanders. It'd be very close, but I think the winner of this game was going to have a good thing because they had home field. They're going to have home field. And the Rams on home field in the playoffs, yeah, that's going to be tough to beat. But Washington's very good, as you saw. We'll get into kind of previewing that game later because we have one more game. But I wanted to dive into something before I get into the next game. I know I've talked about luck in some of these games, but when you have a game like football with a much smaller sample size for how many games there are, how many plays are in a given game, offense one and defense the other, split them in half basically, being in a one-game elimination as well, with weather being a factor that's not the case in any other sport really, it's a game with the most variability in terms of what can happen on any given play and how that one play can completely change any given game. If it's basketball, obviously you don't have all that other stuff. One play could change a game, but it has to be at the end, not in the middle of the game or something like that. And more often than not, with NFL, it's someone making some sort of mistake or a bad play. That's, I think, majority, not all, but if you had to quantify, okay, this is what won the game, what lost in the game for any given football game, the majority is going to be, okay, it was because this guy did this and why we lost. And that's why the Patriots kind of went on that run. They had the perfect blend of not minimizing the mistakes and trying to, even if they didn't have a ton of great plays or anything, if they minimized their mistakes, it was okay. They were going to make less mistakes than you, and whenever you make one, they're going to fully take advantage of it, and it's going to be the reason they win the game. And that's what football is, and I think that you have to look at it majority, not all. Like we bring up the Eagles game, good example. We bring up the reason why they lost potentially. Well, hey, the reason why they won, Saquon Barkley broke off a big run and when they needed it. That's a player making a play, which, you going back to the luck thing, you have fumbles that are indirectly caused, the ball falling on the ground, bouncing one way or the other, and a team falling on it in the right way, errant mistakes by the quarterback or by the defense that leads to turnovers or penalties on each side. And this can be just a thing that pulls teams all the way to the end. It really can. It doesn't take away from the performance of the players or the team. You still need their plays, like we mentioned, Jaden Daniels, Saquon Barkley, etc. But there's so much that goes into a game and just one play in general. There's so much that goes into any one given play that one person doing something, making a mistake or anything can change everything. And that doesn't stop. And it's only exemplified here in this final game that we're going to talk about, which was the most anticipated game. And I'd say it definitely delivered. And that's Ravens-Bills. Now, the final result didn't end with the team coming out that I had thought, but I acknowledged, obviously, the coin flip aspect of, hey, this is a coin flip game, but I'm just going along with the stuff I see, and while I can't absolutely be close, you can pick both teams, I'm going to go with the Ravens in this game. Now, when you look at it, it's very similar to what we just mentioned, and I think it's just objectively true. Baltimore had 3 turnovers in this game, and they were 1 catch away from making it overtime. 3 turnovers, and they were still one catch away. 1 wide open catch away from making it go to overtime, which is, based on how the game was going, I think it would be in favor of Baltimore if the game went to overtime, even if Buffalo got the ball first, which, I mean, because the Ravens literally almost doubled Buffalo's yards in that game. They literally almost doubled them. And it's really unfortunate because Lamar wasn't bad. He wasn't. It's just true. He was not objectively bad in the totality of a game. He helped them lead them down the field on a huge drive. King Henry before that had, his big drive to get them within 1 score, and then Lamar at the end had the drive to, make it within 1 play, 2-point conversion. And Buffalo had 6 points in the second half, so they really were winning in that second half. And the only 2 things on Lamar were the beginning interception, which was a miscommunication with the receiver, and Buffalo didn't even score off of that, so it was slightly inconsequential, although you could say, hey, if they don't throw that pick, maybe they go down and score. So objectively, any turnover is a missed opportunity for the offense, even if the defense doesn't take advantage of it. But then it was mainly the fumble. The fumble he had, they were looking to score some points on the opponent. They were on the opponent's side of the field, and Lamar tries to switch the ball in his other hand, and it's cold, and it falls out of his hand, and he fumbles. But he's not the main reason, because obviously it's clearly Mark Andrews. It clearly is. Having a costly fumble in the second half when they were really looking to make it an even game, that just totally ruined everything. But it almost didn't even matter, because they were still 1 catch away that Mark Andrews dropped a wide open rollout 2-point conversion play that lost them the game. And again, they realistically probably win. We can also look at Zay Flowers not being there. I think that really limited their offense, of which Rashad Bateman had to do more, and he got injured in the game. King Henry, honestly, aside from 1 good drive, was not amazing. There were way more plays than you would think where King Henry stopped at the line of scrimmage for 2 yards, 3 yards. He had a few 7-yard plays here and there, but he also had a drop at the beginning of the game, and he really helped on that 1 drive that helped them in. So he had a good game, obviously, because the 1 drive, you get a touchdown because of you, hey, thanks. But throughout the totality of the game, from what we expect from Derrick Henry, wasn't a Derrick Henry performance, throughout the entire game. And both defenses had injuries, but it wasn't going to come down to the defenses for this game. It was going to be, the Bills are one of the best teams at getting turnovers. The Ravens are one of the best teams at containing just yardage in general for the offense. Defenses had each thing that they were good at. But once again, it was one that killed themselves and didn't execute. And that became the reason, the end result for this game. Again, not taken away from Bills' performance, but I think, it's almost more of a compliment because they didn't make mistakes. I think that's the biggest thing that Joe Brady has implemented in this offense. Josh Allen is contained but not contained at the same time. He's a perfectly amount of containing the chaos with Josh Allen while still trying to take advantage of the greatness of Josh Allen. And I think their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, has really shown that in how he can run this team in offense. But it's very similar to the Ravens-Chiefs games last year. The Chiefs didn't do much in the second half after they got ahead, and the Ravens shot themselves in the foot from unfortunate plays. And last year, I think it was way more on Lamar Jackson. This year, he had his mistake, but they were right there to do it. And it really, at the end, he's not the number one to blame. He's just not. And it's unfortunate for him because the Ravens, I think, were the better team. But the better team does not always win. So credit to the Bills for, protecting their home turf there and getting to the Super Bowl in a year that some people didn't even have them in the playoffs, including myself, because it was very hard to put them in. And now we have the title games for each side. Some teams that are there I knew would be there. Others I could have seen coming. Others I did not see at all, but a good mix there. First one, NFC title game. Both teams are pretty fortunate to be here. They have some pretty fortunate wins. Eagles with the weather versus the Rams, and Tampa Bay with the complete blunder that they had, and then Washington getting a double doink for the Commanders. That helps them a ton as well. When looking at this game, Washington has been winning it by just trying to completely outscore the other offense and just win in a shootout. Philly has been kind of trying to win games by leaning on their defense, leaning on the run game, that kind of stuff. I think Philly really needs to make sure that they are healthy defensively in this game because they're going to need literally as much help as possible, especially in the secondary. And if they get into a similar game like Detroit did, I don't trust Hurts. I just don't. So if they can do a similar behind-the-sticks kind of game, Washington is... I feel more confident about them winning this football game because I don't trust Hurts in that kind of environment. But Washington didn't play a defense like Philly in any of the games they played. The Commanders' defense was, not bad, but pass rushing they really lacked, and they had some guys in the secondary that weren't playing as well, like Antoine Winfield. They just lost their safety in an unfortunate shooting in Jordan Whitehead. So secondary for the, just the defense all around for the Bucs was kind of suspect, and the Lions, we obviously know what the Lions was. But Washington's defense, it was not. It hasn't been good, especially against the run. Philly's one of the lowest turnover teams, like Washington is, but Philly's defense forces 9 more compared to Washington's offense. And again, I know you can talk about Washington's, things that they had, which if I can say Jared Goff had a really bad game, I could say, hey, maybe Hurts does too. It's just the only thing with Hurts is if there's an issue, he could just run. He can run, and they could just go ahead and do that. And they might not even get in that spot because their defense is so good. So because of that, it could get into a similar game like the Lions, but I just don't think it will because I don't think they're going to be in that spot because their defense is so good, Philly. So I'm going to go with Philly to make the Super Bowl. The pick that I had at the beginning of the year changed it last second because I was too scared. I went with the Lions. So, hey, maybe you should go with your first instinct all the time. Anyways, but I have Philly. And then AFC title game, it's so hard. It's just like the last game, the Bills-Ravens game. Very hard to pick. Who's looked like the better team? Buffalo. They have. Who's owned the other team? Kansas City. Owning Buffalo, especially in the playoffs. At Kansas City. Never beat them. This is almost a useless for me to even dive into because everything says Buffalo. Statistically and play on the field, everything. But it's the same group of guys who have beat them every single time. And I really just don't know. I'm not even going to bet on this game at all because I have no clue, and it's so hard. If I had to pick for content purposes, I'm slightly leaning Bills right now because I'm just a numbers guy, and I play on the field, and it's hard for me to buy into objective stuff. That's just me. And they've looked better. But Kansas City has just owned them. They turn it up in the playoffs. I think if both teams come out similarly to how they did against their divisional opponent, the Bills against the Ravens, the Chiefs against the Texans. I think Bills win. But is there a mental aspect here? Yeah, totally. With Josh Allen going there and winning, there totally is. So I think that plays a factor. And coaching, I think Sean McDermott versus Andy Reid is not even close. And I think the only thing saving the Bills right now is Joe Brady offensively. I think he's a great offensive mind and will get a head coaching job. And I think he's a really big reason why they're here. But, it's Joe Brady's going to have to get them to win this game. If they do, it's going to have to be the offensive coordinator, play calling. That's going to be it. Again, I'd slightly lean Bills, but I have no idea. I think I have one bet that at the beginning of the year I put $20 for the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl to win 120. I think I might just hedge it and do, Bills versus Eagles Super Bowl and just hedge the bet just to make sure it's safe. But either way, this is so hard to pick. I'm just hoping for another 13-second game like we had last time. I don't know if that's going to be the case because these offenses have lost, some playmakers, but still really looking for a good game. If I had to pick, I would say slightly Bills. Slightly. It's also an underdog, so maybe you can go for that. But I'm not going to die on a pick or anything at all because Kansas City could totally win this game. And I do think it would depend on the matchup, but I think I really got to see how these teams play to see if they would beat the NFC champ. Because right now in my head, I'm thinking AFC is going to win. But if they don't perform the way we really expect or anything in these games, I think it wouldn't be shocked for the NFC champ to go ahead and maybe win the Super Bowl. Who knows? But if I had to pick one, I would say whoever wins this AFC title game, at least as of right now, would be the winner of the Super Bowl. But thanks for tuning in. Those are just my reactions to the NFL Divisional Round. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Go ahead and check out any other videos that you are interested in. I have a lot coming up, a lot of different stuff. So as always, stay smart, stay sharp, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.